November 4th, 1922. The Valley of the Kings. At dawn is colorless. White limestone, white dust, white sky, bleaching to nothing at the edges. The air smells of dry rock and the mineral aftertaste of a land that has not seen rain in months. A water boy trips over a stone step cut into the bedrock beneath the remains of ancient workmen's huts. He does not know it yet. Nobody knows it yet. But 12 steps below that stone, behind a plastered doorway stamped with the oval seals of the necropolis guardians, a jackal crouching over 9 bound captives, a dead king has been waiting in the dark for 3,200 years. Within 5 months, the man who financed the excavation will be dead from a shaving cut. Within 2 years, the newspapers of the world will have constructed one of the most durable myths of the 20th century. An ancient curse, born not in a pharaoh's tomb, but in a Fleet Street newsroom. And its parents will not be priests, but journalists who lost a media deal. Here is what actually happened. The man who found the step was working for Howard Carter, a self-taught English archaeologist who had spent the better part of a decade searching the Valley of the Kings on the money of George Edward Stanhope Molyneux Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. Carnarvon was not an archaeologist. He was a wealthy English aristocrat with damaged lungs, the result of a severe automobile accident in 1901 that had nearly killed him. And he wintered in Egypt because English damp made it difficult for him to breathe. He funded Carter's excavations partly out of genuine passion for the ancient world, and partly because a man with broken lungs needs something to do with his winters. By the autumn of 1922, Carnarvon's patience and money were running out. He had told Carter that this would be the last season. 1 more year of digging in the valley, and the concession would be surrendered. Then, the water boy found the step. Carter cleared the staircase. He found the sealed doorway. He saw the necropolis stamps and something more, partial cartouches that would later be confirmed as Tutankhamun's. And then, he did something that tells you who he was. He stopped. He reburied the staircase. He sent a telegram to Carnarvon in England. At last, have made wonderful discovery in valley. A magnificent tomb with seals intact. Recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations. He waited 3 weeks for his patron to arrive from England. 3 weeks, with the greatest archaeological discovery of the century buried again under the sand, because the man who paid for it deserved to be there. Carnarvon arrived with his daughter, Lady Evelyn Herbert. On November 26th, in the presence of a small group, Carter made a breach hole in the upper corner of the sealed doorway. He held up a candle. Hot air rushed out of the chamber, making the flame gutter. And then his eyes adjusted. At first I could see nothing, Carter later wrote, the hot air escaping from the chamber causing the candle flame to flicker. But presently, as my eyes grew accustomed to the light, details of the room within emerged slowly from the mist. Strange animals, statues, and gold. Everywhere the glint of gold. Carnarvon, standing behind him, asked the only question anyone could ask. Can you see anything? Yes, Carter said. Wonderful things. You have probably heard those 2 words before. They may be the most famous 2 words in the history of archaeology. But hold them for a moment, because what matters is what happened in the months that followed. Not inside the tomb, but outside it. Carnarvon made a decision that would shape everything. He sold exclusive press rights to the Times of London. It was a reasonable choice, a way to control the narrative and fund the excavation. But it locked out every other newspaper in the world. The Daily Express, the Daily Mail, correspondents from New York, Paris, Berlin, all of them shut out of the biggest story of the decade. And locked out journalists are creative journalists. When Carnarvon died on April 5th, 1923, less than 5 months after the tomb's official opening, Those rival newspapers had every commercial incentive in the world to frame his death as something more than medical misfortune. They needed a story that would outsell the Times exclusive. What they found was a curse. Here is what actually killed Lord Carnarvon. A mosquito bit him on the cheek sometime during his stay in Egypt. While shaving, he nicked the bite with his razor. The nick became infected. The infection became erysipelas, a bacterial skin infection that in the pre-antibiotic era could not be effectively treated. The erysipelas progressed to blood poisoning, then pneumonia. In a man whose lungs had been compromised since a car crash 22 years earlier, pneumonia was a death sentence. He died in his room at the Continental Savoy Hotel in Cairo at the age of 56. No ancient magic required. A mosquito, a razor, damaged lungs, and a world that would not have penicillin for another 2 decades. But that is not the story the newspapers told. The cultural soil for a curse had been ready for decades. Louisa May Alcott, yes, the author of Little Women, had published a mummy curse story in 1869. Bram Stoker wrote The Jewel of 7 Stars in 1903. The trope was Victorian literary furniture. And now, Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of the most hyper-rational, fictional detective who ever lived, went before the press and declared that Carnarvon's death was the work of elementals, not spirits, that Pharaohs' priests had placed to guard the tomb. Let that settle for a moment. The man who invented Sherlock Holmes told the world that ancient Egyptian priests had summoned supernatural entities to kill a British earl. The gap between what Doyle created on the page and what he believed in life is one of the strangest facts of the 20th century. Meanwhile, Marie Corelli, a popular novelist, claimed she possessed an Arabic text warning of death to those who disturbed the pharaoh's rest. She had written to newspapers before Carnarvon even died, warning of danger. Whether she was sincere, publicity-hungry, or both is a question no one can fully answer. But the myth needed one more element. It needed the inscription. You have heard this. Almost everyone has heard this. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. It is carved above the entrance of the tomb. Every documentary, every horror film, every listicle about Tutankhamun includes some version of it. It does not exist. No such inscription was found in KV62. Not on the doorway, not on the walls, not on the shrines, not on the sarcophagus. Howard Carter's meticulous records describe every text in the tomb, and nothing resembling this phrase appears anywhere. Carter denied it publicly, repeatedly, with growing irritation for the rest of his life. The inscription was fabricated, composited by journalists from protective formulae found in entirely different tombs, most of them 1,000 years older, and none of them in the Valley of the Kings. Some Old Kingdom mastabas do contain threats against tomb robbers, asking the gods to punish intruders. These are bureaucratic threats, not mystical curses. They read like legal warnings, not horror scripts. And they are nowhere near Tutankhamun's tomb. The curse, then, was not ancient. It was born in 1923 in newsrooms on Fleet Street, written on deadline by journalists who needed a story bigger than the Times exclusive. And once it existed, it needed bodies. So the death list grew. George J. Gould, an American financier, visited the tomb as a tourist in 1923 and died a few weeks later on the French Riviera. He was 59. He had been ill before the visit, and his death was attributed to pneumonia following a general decline. He was not part of the excavation team. He walked through a tomb and died of a disease he already had. The newspapers added him to the list. Prince Ali Kamel, Fahmy Bey, an Egyptian, visited the tomb and was shot dead by his wife in the Savoy Hotel in London in July of 1923. His wife stood trial at the Old Bailey and was acquitted. This was a domestic homicide. The only connection to Egypt was the prince's nationality. The newspapers added him to the list. Aubrey Herbert, Carnarvon's half-brother, died in September 1923 following dental surgery. He suffered from progressive blindness. He never entered the tomb. His only link to the story was his last name. The newspapers added him to the list. If you are keeping count, you can see what is happening. The list was built by inclusion. Anyone who had ever been near the tomb, or near someone who had been near the tomb and who subsequently died of anything. An assassination by Egyptian nationalists. A suicide by an elderly man. A mundane coronary event. Every death within a decade of someone who had walked past the tomb's entrance was drafted into service. And yet, there is one case in the list that is genuinely eerie, not because it proves anything supernatural, but because it shows what happens when a myth becomes its own kind of poison. Richard Bethel was Howard Carter's personal secretary during the excavation. He was found dead in bed at the Mayfair Club in London in November of 1929, aged 46. The cause was likely a coronary event, premature but not extraordinary for the era. His father, Lord Westbury, 78 years old, had been despondent since his son's death. The press hounded him with questions about the curse. On a February morning in 1930, Lord Westbury jumped from the window of his 7th-floor apartment at St. James's Court. His suicide note reportedly referenced an inability to bear the horror any longer. The curse did not push that man from his window. Grief did. Grief, and a press that told him his family was marked for death by ancient forces. The narrative itself became the weapon. So what does the evidence actually show? In 1934, Herbert Winlock, director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, did what no journalist had bothered to do. He counted. Of the 26 people present at the opening of the tomb, only 6 had died within a decade. Of the 22 present at the opening of the sarcophagus, only 2 had died within a decade. Of the 10 people present at the unwrapping of the mummy, none had died within a decade. None. The numbers describe normal mortality for early 20th century adults. There was nothing to explain because nothing unusual had happened. Then, in 2002, Mark Nelson of Monash University published a study in the British Medical Journal, a peer-reviewed medical journal, not a tabloid, analyzing the survival of 44 Westerners identified by Carter as present during key tomb events. The mean age at death of the so-called cursed group was 70 years old. There was no statistically significant difference between those who had entered the tomb and those who had not. The curse, measured against the only standard that matters, did not exist. But here is where the story turns, because there is something genuinely interesting in the science, just not what the myth promised. Sealed tombs are not sterile environments. Microbiologists have documented that caves and burial chambers can harbor viable fungal spores for centuries, perhaps millennia. In 1999, Gotthard Kramer of the University of Leipzig analyzed samples from Egyptian tombs and identified potentially dangerous mold spores, including Aspergillus niger and Aspergillus flavus. These organisms can cause aspergillosis, a respiratory infection, in immunocompromised individuals. And Lord Carnarvon was immunocompromised. His lungs had been damaged for 22 years. He was exactly the kind of person for whom a burst of ancient fungal spores in a sealed chamber could serve as a contributing factor to respiratory collapse. Not the sole cause, not a curse, but a biological nudge on a body already failing. That is the truth the science offers. Not 22 deaths explained by toxic mold. 1 death, maybe, with a plausible biological contributing factor. And a man who nicked a mosquito bite while shaving, in a world where a razor cut could still kill you? The honest answer is more disturbing than the myth. Not because it is supernatural, but because it is so mundane. We want the dead to be dangerous. We want sealed chambers to hold power. We want 3,000 years of darkness to mean something when the light returns. And when the truth is a mosquito and a razor and unreliable lungs, we reach for something larger, because the smallness of the cause feels disproportionate to the grandeur of the setting. Now consider Howard Carter, the man who opened the tomb, the man who breathed its air first, the man who spent not hours but years inside KV-62, cataloging, photographing, preserving, lifting each of the 5,000 objects with his own hands. If a toxic curse existed, if an ancient biological agent waited in the darkness, Carter was its primary target by every possible measure of exposure. Howard Carter died on March 2nd, 1939, at the age of 64, of lymphoma, 17 years after the tomb opening. He outlived Carnarvon by 16 years. He outlived the myth. But here is the part of Carter's story that no one tells, and it is more melancholy than any curse. The man who made the greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century never received a knighthood. He was never awarded an honorary degree by a major university. He spent his later years in relative obscurity, working in a modest London flat, increasingly isolated from the academic establishment that had never fully accepted a self-taught archaeologist without a university pedigree. The professional politics of Egyptology, the class system, the credentialing hierarchy, the fallout from his bitter disputes with the Egyptian Antiquities Service sidelined him more effectively than any pharaoh's wrath. And Lady Evelyn Herbert, Carnarvon's daughter, one of the first 3 people to enter the antechamber. She died in 1980, at 79. Dr. Derry, the anatomist who autopsied Tutankhamun's mummy, who held the pharaoh's bones in his bare hands, lived to approximately 87. The people with the greatest exposure lived the longest. The curse spared everyone it should have killed first. If you have stayed with this story this far, I want to ask you something. Think about the last time you heard someone tell a story that was too good to check. A claim that confirmed something you already half believed, that ancient places hold power, that science has not explained everything, that the old world has teeth. Think about how easily you accepted it. Think about how resistant you were when someone offered the boring explanation. That resistance is the real curse, not of the pharaohs, of us. Once a story achieves a certain emotional momentum, evidence cannot stop it. The British Medical Journal published a statistical demolition of the curse in 2002. It changed nothing. Right now, today, the curse of the pharaohs still populates documentaries, listicles, and social media posts as though it were an open question. The myth outlived the data by decades, and it will outlive this script too. The ancient Egyptians, for what it is worth, would have understood this perfectly. They spent 3,000 years carving names into stone because they knew that what gets remembered depends on who controls the record. They built temples to ensure their version of events would survive. They understood that narrative is power, that the story you tell about the dead shapes the world of the living. The newspapers of 1923 knew the same thing. They wrote a story about an ancient curse, and the story was so satisfying, so perfectly shaped to the anxieties of a modern world that had just watched millions die in a war it could not explain, that no amount of evidence could undo it. If you have been to the Egyptian galleries of a museum, if you have stood before a painted coffin or a limestone relief and felt the hairs on your arms lift, that feeling is real. It is the legitimate vertigo of standing in front of something made by a specific person 4,000 years ago, whose name you can sometimes still read. That vertigo does not need a curse to be powerful. It does not need supernatural danger. The danger is real enough already. The danger of forgetting that these were people, not props in a ghost story. That they built and wrote and buried their dead with a specificity and a tenderness that survives because they meant it to survive. Tutankhamun's tomb held no curse. It held something more extraordinary. 5,000 objects placed around a dead teenager by people who loved him, or served him, or feared what would happen if the rituals were not performed correctly. Gold and linen and cedar and resin and grain and bread and wine, arranged in a room barely larger than a modern apartment's living room, sealed in darkness, waiting. What killed Lord Carnarvon was not the tomb. It was a mosquito and a razor and lungs that had never healed, and a world that had not yet invented the medicine that could have saved him in an afternoon. What created the curse was not ancient priests. It was modern journalists, working on deadline, furious about a media deal, and smart enough to know that a dead earl and an open tomb would sell more papers than the truth. Howard Carter, who knew this, spent 17 more years trying to tell people what he had actually found. Mostly they wanted to hear about the curse. The next time you see Tutankhamun's golden mask in a photograph, that serene, impossible face of lapis and gold. Remember that the man who lifted it from the darkness died without a knighthood, in a London flat, having outlived every myth the world tried to wrap around his discovery. The tomb is still there, cut into the white limestone of the Valley of the Kings. The mask is in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. The curse is in the newspapers, where it was born, where it lives, and where, against all evidence, it refuses to die. Some things, it turns out, are harder to kill than a pharaoh.